Welcome to It's a Grand Life. Did you know that in the United States alone, 2.4 million kids are being raised by their grandparents or other family members other than mom or dad? 2.4 million. It's a Grand Life is a podcast for those grandparents and kinship caregivers who are committed to making a difference for those kids. Grand families are in every neighborhood, every city, tribe, and territory nationwide. If this is you or someone you love, this podcast is for you. Our goal is to offer hope and resources to help you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us wherever you get your audio podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. Welcome to another episode of It's a Grand Life. Hello, my name is Craig Nash, and we'd like to welcome you to another It's a Grand Life. And I don't know where you are in the U.S., but if you're here in Michigan with our guest today, Jan Wagner and myself, it is cold. But we're still living a grand life, and we're delighted to bring this wonderful person to you today, this advocate for the grand families. Jan Wagner, welcome to It's a Grand Life.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here, and this is all new to me, too. I just kind of found you through references and everything, and we'll go from there.
Exactly right. And but you have been an advocate for grand families in the state of Michigan for a long time. In fact, I was talking to one of our mutual friends, Bob Rubel, yesterday from California, told me you guys been connected for a long time. But tell us a little bit about yourself, Jan, and how you became a grand family and what that journey's been like for you and your husband.
It's been a roller coaster. I can start right out with that. I wanted to be grandma so bad when I turned 50. And I got 6 of them in 5 years.
Wow.
And that was the end of it. You know, now they're all grown up and I'm all alone again. And I keep saying it's time for great grandchildren. But I'm not raising any of them. And they said, well, then you're not getting any right now, Grandma. Right. So the grandchild we're raising is the youngest of the 6.
Okay.
And his mother just couldn't parent. It just wasn't in her. This was her second child. The first child stayed with the father. We did keep a close connection with her through the grace of him and his new wife. And she was the oldest of the 6.
Okay.
So my daughter was just young and impatient and immature. And, well, she had hurt her back. And, of course, there were some prescriptions added. And things got complicated. And when she came home expecting this baby that we're raising, I said, you know, you need to stay here. I didn't want her to fall apart with the realization of where things went. So she stayed with us while she was pregnant, kind of back and forth, which is, you know, the pattern.
Right.
And actually, the difficult part is, and what I like to say is, the whole journey of raising a grandchild, it's our story. Her story is hers to tell.
Right.
And her story is someday, if she's there and she can tell it, you know, God with her. But it's not our place to put them down, to show our anger. You know, I'm past that. Our grandchild is 17 now.
Right.
Almost 18. We'll be 18 in April.
Okay.
So we had, she tried to keep him, and she tried to continue her lifestyle and live in our front yard in another house we had. And you know, it just wasn't working. And finally, just shortly after our grandchild's second birthday, it was like, I have to go and find a job. I'm going down to the city. And I swear you're not taking the kid.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I'll quit my job. I'll do what we have to do, but you can't. You know, she can't handle that lifestyle. She can't handle being moved around anymore. Leave her here, and you know, she's, well, it'll only be a couple of weeks. Well, it wasn't. And so at first, because of helping with our first grandchild when her
Right.
mom left, I knew how emotionally distraught babies, little kids, 2-year-olds become. And so did we. And this time I just decided we're just going to do what we do.
You know,
We're not going to beg, plead, manipulate, nothing. We're just going to do it. And so that's how we did it. And so when she was turned 2, she was ours pretty much, full time. That was the end of it. She never looked back.
well, I got to give you credit for that, because that's a very challenging decision to make. First of all, that you're going to raise your grandchild, and my wife and I put that decision off as long as we could. We kept thinking that the clouds were going to part and everything was going to get back to normal, and Walt Disney was going to write this nice little script for our new life, but that's just not what happened. And we finally had a friend who's, by the way, just is 82, and her grandson just finished high school, so she's just finishing her grand tour, if you will. And she spoke to my wife Kathy and I and said, you got to make a change. You got to make a choice, and you can really only support one. And if one is going to go off and live this different lifestyle, you got to be there for your grand. And that was very, very. It was like a bucket of cold water in the face. Really sobered us up, and it was, you're right. We've got to make this decision, and. So you and your husband, you are ready for grandkids. Here we go. We got these grandkids coming, and now you've taken it to a whole new level. Now you are raising one of your grands and back putting the mom and dad hat on again for your husband, and I know you'd probably do it over again in a second, but it's a different choice. You never thought you'd be here, right?
No, I wanted to be the cookie grandma. I wanted all the kids to come for sleepovers and make cookies, and we'd do this and we'd do that and go play on the beach. And as it turned out, if we did do those things, there was usually 5 or 6 in tow, because I still had to be grandma to the rest of the kids.
Right.
It was really, really difficult for the little one we had to share me. And it was hard for the kids that came first to share me. So it messes with the family dynamics, and it messes with your head, it messes with your adult kids' heads, and it messes with the rest of the grandkids. But there was a lot of objections from outside, not really from within the family dynamics together, but because we talked about it and everybody knew something has to be done.
Right.
But it was from the outside. Well, why are you doing this? You're going to enable you need to give them back the responsibility. You need to do this and this and this. And I said, not really,
right.
Because I need to know where this kid is.
100%. Right.
And I need to know they're safe, and I need to know they're not with a babysitter a week at a time or wherever else, because they moved around a lot.
As kids in this as parents in this situation do. I know that's a situation with my daughter. It gave us fits, not knowing where our granddaughter was going to be. And it took us a while to make the call that you and your husband did, but I think it absolutely was the right call. But then you went a step beyond that. You started to advocate for other grand families. And so how did that transition occur? And when did you feel called to really want to help your peers?
When I found out, I didn't know anything. And I needed to know something. I went to the Child Welfare Agency. I went to DHHS and because I thought that's what I had to do.
Right.
Everybody said, you got to report her, you have to get registered, you have to do these things. Well, I went into the department where I'd never been before in my entire life and talked to, child welfare worker.
Right.
And they just, the word that we use anyway, and the word that's very well known is diverted. If that child is already safe in your hands, if the mother is not causing any harm or anything to happen, then we're not going to open a case.
Wow.
Nobody told me that if they didn't open the case, they wouldn't give me a caseworker. They wouldn't help me with some of the services that I had been told I needed to apply for. And what they told me was go to the courthouse and file for guardianship. So I went right straight to the courthouse and filed for guardianship, thinking, okay, this is what I have to do.
Right.
And we got emergency guardianship. And then I went back and I said, okay, now what can you do to help us out?
How'd that go?
Nothing. Sorry, nothing. Case has never been opened, and if it was, it's closed.
Right.
So we had a really small grandparents raising grandchildren's support group that a woman had started maybe 20 years before that. And they all stayed together. It was through their through the senior center. And they had just kind of stayed together. And they did social things and everything. And so I walked into one of those meetings. I kind of felt like I was walking into an AA meeting or something, your guts turning and you're shaking and what am I walking into and everything else. And it was a group of grandmas. And I was at that time the youngest because I was 57, I think. And the woman that was running it, and because they had their kids were all older,
right?
She got into and got them into, or tried to get into a little legislative work. And I didn't know why they needed legislative work. What's this all about? And there was a legislator in Detroit, and it was about 20 years ago. And she had a lot of grandparents that were raising their grandchildren. There's a big population down there.
Sure.
I mean, up here in the northern part of the state, we're, 5 here and half a dozen here, and we're scattered. But down there, they had a large population, and she wanted to do something for her grandfamilies to help them get some support.
Okay.
So they worked on this bill, and of course, the process is you submit it, it gets looked at, it gets tweaked, you submit it again, it gets looked at, it gets tweaked, and as it ended, the group from here all went down when it was signed. And they all thought, yay, this is support for grandparents raising grandchildren. And we're finally going to see some light. And it had been tweaked to the point of when it actually came out in the reading, they found out that it was only for children within the child welfare system.
Oh my.
So we're still all these informal families, all these guardianship families, and they're still there and wasn't going to help. Now, I had asked, well, what if I did put my child through the child welfare system? And I was told, well, A, you can't. And B, if you did, we can place that child wherever we feel it's best to place that child. And the first thing we're going to do is try and find the mother. So, nope, not going to do that one either.
Right.
But can you help me? No. Get licensed. No, I can't get licensed, remember? And I did have a meeting with, what was her name? Maura Corrigan at the time, and she was the head. And I was in a meeting with her with some foster families and adoptive families, and they all talked about all the things that needed to be done. And I said, but what about kinship? Right. And it was like I dropped the ball in the room. It went, huh? And she said, well, no, if kinship needs to be licensed, and that's what you need to do. And I tried to say, but I can't get licensed. And she said, well, that isn't right, Go get licensed, and then you come back and you talk to me. And she didn't understand either that we were left out in the cold.
Right.
So I said, I've had enough. I went to foster care family meetings. I joined a foster care association that was for foster and adoptive parents, but it had a K on the end for kinship. And I went to their conference and I sat down and I said, well, when are we going to get to the kinship part? Oh, well, not that kind of kinship. What do you mean, not that kind? Well, it was kinship in the formal system. So I started by explaining to them what was informal and what was guardianship and the big differences. And so I joined that association. We did some child welfare trainings.
Wow.
I was in a lot of good places to get the word out. And then I started learning how to legislate and how to tell my story, how to meet with my Congress people and my state lawmakers. And everybody loved hearing about it. Everybody thought, oh, this is, these are grandparents and we could be grandparents and this could be us. And
right.
I had one that he was furious because a child in guardianship is considered a homeless child. A child living with their grandparents you can get free lunch and you can get Medicaid because they were homeless. Well, this legislator said, my kid isn't homeless. It's living with me. Wow. What is this? But that was how it's written up so they could get free lunch. And that was how the services, not really services, but how some things could happen. We were able to get TANF. It was enough for maybe diapers.
Right. That's the other thing. You fight for all this support, and there's just $78 or something like that. It was just
right, and that's more than we got.
Right.
And that is not the same across the country.
Right.
Some states pay more, Some states pay even less. Some states won't pay it at all. So that was legislation that had to be worked on. Not locally, but
Nationally?
nationally,
Right.
to get it all the way across. And the more I talked and the more I looked at things and the more I got involved, the less I found things were happening. And you have your problems with, you get yourself a champion, you get yourself this legislator, and he's really ready to get into it, and then you have a new election. And they're gone.
Wow.
Or maybe something bad is going on and they have to really focus on that. So I did keep my name out there. I had support groups online. I had the support group here in town. But things just weren't, sorry.
That's all right. So you first thing you looked at was the best path to go on with you and your grandchild, whether it's foster or adoption or guardianship, and they immediately said they wanted you to take the guardianship role, right? And then So you did that, and that what folks don't know is that excludes you from a lot of the other services that may be available from the foster care program. But if you go the foster route, that allows the state access to your family and everything going on in your house. And if you have other kids in the house, they're available to be reviewed and inspected as well. And, for those of us who are private people, we don't like a lot of that, folks coming by the house and all that.
Well, and it's not even so much we don't like having coming by the house. It's a stigma.
Right.
In a lot of ways. And it's also, it's fear. Right. I was afraid of them. I was afraid of Child Protective Services because in the circles that I was traveling and in the stories that I would hear, you would hear awful stories of, this happened, I know it's two-sided, but I also know, we know our family.
Right.
We know our grandchild.
Right.
I could be an open book to them and it'd be okay. But somebody else might have something in their background long time ago that would bring up red flags at some point or another. I'm not saying every grandparent, every aunt and uncle is the best place for a child.
Right.
But what I am saying is if they are trained, educated in the new ways of handling things, if they have some oversight, it's the best place. But I don't think the state belongs keeping our kids.
Absolutely.
And telling us what we can and can't do.
And
I just don't.
I agree. And statistically, the kids are better off being with a family member or member, whether it's grandma and grandpa or another kinship person, because the results are just staggering when they're not. And this is really, the bottom line is, it is all about the kids. And I know that is totally your commitment. And so as we kind of wind up our time here today, what would you say is the biggest challenge to raising a grand family for someone who's just starting it, and what did you wish you knew then that you know now? And for folks that are just taking a look at this.
I wish that I had known about trauma.
Right.
I wish that I had known about all these little acronyms that they use for everything, the adverse child experiences.
Right. The ACEs. Yep, sure. Yep.
I wish I had known about how to work with the schools, how to work with mental health, how to work with the child welfare system, how to navigate things. I mean, we were even turned down by a program designed to support families within the school system. And, I called them and I said, well, can we, be part of this and get some therapy, some counseling? Have your caseworker give us the recommendation. Okay, no caseworker. Sorry. And that was the end of that. So I wish I had not been as timid. It didn't take long not to be, but it took tons and tons and tons of self-research, self-educating, advocating for us based on what was best for the child. And that's all it's all about, period. If we're not healthy and we're not informed and we don't know what we're doing, we're not helping that child at all, because it's not the same as raising our biological kids.
Right.
The world changes every decade,
Yeah. Yes.
It really does. And we need to keep up. And when you're ready to retire, you really aren't so sure you want to keep up.
That's so
but
true.
You do.
Right.
You don't have a choice. You keep up.
Right. Yes.
So I wish I had known those things. I wish I had known the services that foster parents got. Not that it gave me any, but I wish I would have known sooner how to fight. But mostly I tell families the one thing that's the most important is go ahead and think you're going to do this for the short term. Just like you said, yep, we're going to have this epiphany and the white horse is going to come riding in and scoop up the little family and it'll all be better and I can go on my way to Florida for the winter.
Right.
And yeah, that'll be it. But it's okay to think you're doing this short term. But you better lay out those plans for the long term. And one of those plans is the what am I going to do when this happens? What am I going to do if all of a sudden the parent does want to dissolve that guardianship and they're not doing good? Or we waited till our grandchild was 6,
okay.
And then we adopted.
Okay.
Because kids need to say, Mom, Dad.
Right.
They can't just constantly wait. And we were in limbo. Now, we adopted privately.
Okay.
We weren't able to adopt through the system, so we hired an attorney. We had to have someone publish, and we had to terminate the parental rights, even though the father had never signed on. He had to sign off. So there was things like that we had to do. And the day we talked to our grandchild about adopting and what it was and so forth. Well, we went and did this at 6 years old, and then they decided to go back to school in 2nd grade. And so they went back, and the teacher just happened to say, hold it, they've got something very special to tell everybody. Would you like to come up and tell the class what went on today? I got adopted. And the teacher said, well, would you like to explain what that means? And her words were, sometimes when you're a little kid, you have to move around a lot. And lots of people. And then you get adopted, and you know you don't have to move around anymore. And that was, that was good.
That's
That
stability.
was really good.
Yeah.
And we felt good. I've never looked back with adopted. Never looked back because, well, unfortunately, when you do give up the guardianship for adoption, I mean, TANF went away, free lunch went away, the food stamps for the child only went away.
Right.
Because now you're responsible just as any other parent. And it's tough. And I want families to know that. We had to spend anything we had set aside in our 401ks and everything else. That's all gone. We live on Social Security.
Yep.
And when our grandchild turns 18, the portion of Social Security that she draws, she'll no longer be able to draw. So the income's going to drop by a third. And so families have to realize if you're going to fight, you're going to fight to do it. But if you're grandma or grandpa,
right,
or aunt or uncle, you're going to fight. And I think that's why it's so easy for the system to take advantage of us.
Right.
They know those kids are going to stay there. They don't have to find a bed for them unless something really bad happens. Any of those things, it's just, as long as we don't rattle the cage, they aren't going to open it.
Well, and that's why I wanted to get you on today and share your story, and to give us a real world picture of what it's like over the long term, raising your grand, having the grand family. There are sacrifices to make, but first and foremost, we are grandparents, and we would do anything for those kids. And yes, you're an advocate for the state of Michigan for grandparents, but you're the number one advocate for your grandchild, and that's and just doing a phenomenal job, Jan Wagner. And we're just so glad that you were with us here today on It's a Grand Life. And I hope you'll come back. And next time I want to get into some of those issues that you really wish parents knew, like the trauma and the ACEs and the school situation. And can we do that another time? Come back and
Oh, I would love to. I would absolutely love to, because it's important that if you're raising a grandchild, you need to stay current. You need to know it's not a bad kid, it's not a naughty kid, it's not a misbehaving. That child is reacting. Right. That child is doing everything they can possibly do to survive.
Right.
And you can't take it personal.
No, that is so good. So I'm going to hold you to that, Jan. We're going to put a period on it for today, but we're going to come back together real soon and talk about these issues and really try to get some real world information into the families across the country that are wrestling with this, that maybe did not have the skill set that you had and developed to really navigate the waters of government. And we just look forward to having you again on It's a Grand Life. But Jan Wagner, thank you so much for joining us today and for the work you do with Generations United and all these other things. And look forward to having you on again to talk about the real world issues of trauma, school systems, and navigating behavioral health, everything else. But thanks so much for being our guest today.
Anytime.
You got it.
Always ready to tell my story. Nobody else can tell it like I can.
That is for sure. So we'll see you real soon for another edition of It's a Grand Life. Thank you so much for being our guest today. Thank you for joining us today for It's a Grand Life. It's a Grand Life provides vital content, regulatory updates, and subject matter experts that are committed to supporting the 2.4 million kids and their caregivers from every neighborhood, every city, every tribe and territory nationwide. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. As caregivers, we are united in purpose. We are driven by hope while providing strength for today and hope for tomorrow. We are truly making a difference while living the grand life. If you have a suggestion for a future episode, please reach out to us. But we'll see you next time for another It's a Grand Life. Thank you for joining us.